We're living in a moment where the growing social tension across different groups in society, people with divergent opinions, identities, ways of living, are resulting in serious social issues. This may be obvious. One of those issues is climate change. Climate change was once an issue that crossed party lines and was something that everybody was concerned about. But disinformation and misinformation was intentionally sowed, leading to divergent ways of thinking about this issue that affects all of us. And right now, it may feel like there is no way forward, but I would argue there is a solution. And I see it coming from the science of social movements, which is a very long research area that I've worked in for some years. And the most interesting thing to me about successful social movements, there are some characteristics that really do um, characterize successful social movements, is the idea that they bring together diverse coalitions of people, people who you might not otherwise see working together. And in that coalition, they reframe the narrative and society around that issue. And this is what we are working to do at Resilience Creative is to find a way to reframe the narrative and to envision a future through storytelling, through a narrative, a new narrative about climate change that really boldly imagines a brilliant future, a better future for humanity than we've really ever seen before. And by doing that, reframing the narrative, solving the climate crisis. Okay, so you may be asking, can just a story really do this? Isn't it, too ephemeral, too conceptual, and not practical enough? So I'm going to turn that question around on you and ask you, what story have you told yourself about your life, who you are? What story do you tell yourself about what your future looks like? And, this may take a process of becoming conscious of what story you're telling yourself. And what has that story meant for your own life, tangible effects on your own life? We can use or think of the example of athletes, competitive athletes, and the way that they visualize. They visualize every step up to the win. And I've read, I am not a competitive athlete, although I was a serious dancer. I've read that they believe that this visualization process is essential to the win. And why? Because the human mind has trouble differentiating between the imagined and the lived reality. And your imagination is so powerful. So imagining creating a new narrative that helps us see how to move forward, what the future could be, has real effects in one's life. Okay, so if you're going to go with me for a second and just have some thinking that maybe a story could have an influence. You're probably the next question you're asking is, well, what story can we tell about climate change? Because we are having a very hard time as a global humanity really addressing this issue. And this is a question I have been asking in my own research for almost a decade, supported by some of the world's biggest foundations. And these research findings have really informed the approach at resilience. And I want to say that these findings, while I'm talking about what we do in terms of putting things on the screen, film, television, short format kind of work, I also think that these findings are relevant to how you tell a story to your uncle, how you frame climate change or an issue in a presentation you give. Also, what story you're telling yourself about how you can be a part in solving this issue. And I just want to share three findings. There are a lot of findings, but I just want to share three things that relate to both what we do and what you might do in your own life. So first, maybe obviously, but it's worth saying a story has to be good. And when I say good, I mean it's got to be emotionally engaging, compelling, poignant, story forward, entertainment forward. It has got to reel people in and transport them. So really, bringing people into another world and transporting them. Our research has shown bridges a gap between Republicans and Democrats, bridges that gap. I mean, so that they start thinking exactly the same about climate change. It's pretty phenomenal. Second, these stories should involve relatable characters. And, again, when you think about it, a movie or a book that you love, it's mostly because you love that character. So it's not like somebody can identify with, it's somebody who you feel some emotional connection to, some resonance with. So really good characters. And third, and I left, I think, the most surprising thing for last, which is the story should be joyful, should engender a feeling of joy, inspiration, empowerment. And, I really didn't expect this when we were doing this last piece of research about climate change. And it really, I mean, I guess once we came up with it, I realized, okay, maybe that's not, maybe that's obvious because climate change is such a tough issue. And so we all need to feel more inspired about it, feel inspired and empowered to do something about it. And you may be asking now, like, how can you tell a joyful experience about climate change or story about climate change? I'd say it's the same way you tell a joyful story or inspiring story about abortion, HIV, AIDS, domestic violence, really tough issues that we've struggled with as humanity and in many instances have overcome, have really been able to empower people to engage in them. And I'm not a joy expert, but when you look at the literature on joy, what brings people joy is really the same across contexts, across these different kinds of narratives. And I would say is going to be the same thing in terms of how we tell a story about climate change. It's good relationships with other people. It's the ability to overcome, to cope with difficult issues, difficult times. And, in the context of our research about stories about climate specifically, it's about seeing a collective action, people coming together to overcome if it's, battling an enemy, battling a corporation, battling, really working together to overcome something, this is where we see a lot of the joy coming from. So I'll stop there. We have lots of other papers that we can share, but that's the kind of resilience story that we are working on telling. These are just a few of the things that we're working on. This is Resilience Creative's first monthly newsletter. So I hope that you enjoy it and stay tuned for next month when I'll be sharing some other, hopefully, insight about what we're doing. In the meantime, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you and stay well.